From insane ladder spots to falling from unimaginable heights, WWE wrestlers truly go through excruciating pain just to deliver a jaw-dropping moment. Whenever Brock Lesnar uses his elbow to target his opponent's head, it never ends well. Lesnar first used this maneuver in his clash against John Cena at Extreme Rules in 2012. Cena was absolutely destroyed right from the start, with Lesnar busting him open about a minute after the match began. Years later, in 2016, Lesnar used the same brutal tactic on Randy Orton, going into full UFC mode. He delivered legitimate stiff elbow shots right onto Orton's forehead and busting him open. Lesnar would use this move one final time on Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 34 before WWE put a stop on it. Who could blame WWE for putting an end to such a murderous move? Now, if anyone dares to mess with Bianca Belair's hair, it's only bound to come back to them. The most net-worthy moment of hair whipping to this day came at WrestleMania 37, where a particularly loud whip echoed through Raymond James Stadium. Sasha Banks sold the whip as every bit as painful as it sounded to set up Belair hitting the kiss of death for the win. Bianca's hair whip is undeniably brutal, especially with the loud echo it makes. Just ask Becky Lynch how it feels. Even though the chop is a very common wrestling move, its impact largely depends on how brutal it sounds. There have been countless wrestlers who've used the chop over the years, but none of them have made it look as devastating as Gunther. He took the move to a completely new level, with this being a huge part of his matches. Audiences are waiting to see it and listen to the incredible sound that comes from it. Gunther will leave his opponents with red raw chests, creating blistered skin simply due to the chops that he can deliver. Another move is the buckle bomb, which is a move that never gets taken seriously as a potential finisher. However, there is no doubt that it works well as a very devastating move. Seeing Seth lift his opponents, run across the ring, and throw them into the opposite turnbuckle is something that always looks great. However, the main reason fans take this so seriously is that it caused a serious back injury to Sting at Night of Champions in 2015, whereas Finn Balor dislocated his shoulder and was out of action for a few months. Therefore, people tend to wince a little every time Seth uses this move. The Undertaker's Hellgate was a devastating submission move. The dead man would trap his opponent's arm in the crook of his leg while blocking the other with the free leg. He would then pull their neck towards the shin of the crooked leg and cause unimaginable pain. The victims had no choice but to submit unless they wanted some internal hemorrhage. Nikki Bella's Rack Attack was a move that likely caused more harm to her in real life than her opponents. In this move, Nikki Bella positioned her opponent on top of her neck and then dropped down, causing the opponent to bounce off Nikki's neck and onto the mat. While it appeared devastating as a finishing move, over time it posed a serious threat to Nikki's neck. This led her to take a prolonged break from WWE and undergo a neck surgery. How about every time an announcer's table comes into play, some devastation is bound to occur? Who could forget the time when Shane McMahon truly put his life on the line at WrestleMania 32? Even though wrestlers may not sustain severe injuries, since the announcer's table is designed to break easily, there have been some instances where some have landed the hard way. At WrestleMania 24, Shawn Michaels faced Ric Flair in an emotionally charged match. During the match, HBK tried to perform a moonsault on Flair, but Michaels' ribs crashed onto the table. In the main event of WrestleMania 30, former Evolution teammates Randy Orton and Batista reunited to take down Daniel Bryan. Batista executed a powerbomb on Bryan while Orton simultaneously delivered the RKO. However, during the move, Randy's back landed on the TV monitor, and it was evident that he was genuinely hurt from the impact. One of the best things Paige ever did in her short WWE career was to bring back Bull Nakano Angelito's submission. Paige called her version the PTO. It's truly one of the most dangerous submissions of all time. She would slap on the sharpshooter, but instead of spinning around, she'd grab her opponent's arms and wrench back as hard as possible. With no escape in sight, anyone had to tap to it. The coup de grace is undeniably an unforgiving finisher maneuver that very few can kick out of. Performing this move requires Finn Balor to ascend to the top rope and thrust all his weight into his opponent's chest. While Finn Balor has perfected the move, there's no denying the real pain it inflicts on the chest. The Shooting Star Press is one of the best flying moves of all time, but despite its aesthetic appeal, this move is incredibly risky as well. Just a little mistake, and the move could lead to a serious concussion and a broken neck if not performed correctly. Just ask Brock Lesnar. Lesnar nearly broke his own neck attempting to nail this finisher himself against Kurt Angle. This caused WWE to ban the move for many years as it was considered dangerous. Jeff Hardy will undoubtedly be remembered for being one of the greatest risk-taking wrestlers of all time, and Swanton Bomb is one such prime example of it. Once his opponent is down on the mat, Jeff climbs up to the top rope and then jumps off it. Jeff then flips over at the last second, crashing down on his opponents. Hardy has jumped off every place you can imagine, from a balcony, a chamber, and even from a staggering height of 30 feet. While we may not know why it's named after Germany, we do know that the suplex is a very commonly used wrestling move today. Brock Lesnar is likely the first person that comes to mind, and he is practically synonymous with this move, which he hits countless times during his matches, and they always look terrific. However, the excitement of this move comes with the condition that the wrestler must land on their back, and never on their neck, as seen in the case of Big E, where a botched suplex by Rich Holland broke his neck. The Styles Clash is one of the most devastating finishes of all time. This move involves AJ Styles lifting the opponent upside down, trapping their arms with the legs, and dropping them face first on the mat. The receiving wrestler has little margin for error, as he can break his neck for turning his chin during the Styles Clash. In one incident, James Ellsworth nearly broke his neck due to not positioning his head properly during the Styles Crash. In a split second, Styles adjusted to ensure that only Ellsworth's forehead touched the mat, preventing a more severe injury. Ronda Rousey's armbar was treated like it was lethal during her run in WWE. Whenever Rousey applied the submission, it seemed like her opponent's arm was about to come out of its socket. Before Ronda made her WWE debut, she used this maneuver in her UFC career as well, where she traps the victim's arm between her own legs and torques the elbow unnaturally. It was rumored that Alexa Bliss sustained an arm injury from the armbar at Hell in a Cell 2018, prompting her to take a hiatus from wrestling. Several top wrestlers have used spears as their finishers due to its destructive nature. The one man who made the move look the most painful, however, was Bill Goldberg. What makes the spear more dangerous is that this move sees an incoming wrestler taking his opponent down onto the mat with force. It has a massive impact upon connection, which is why it's so easy for fans to accept it could end a match. At the 2016 Survivor Series, Roman Reigns legitimately knocked out Shane McMahon with the spear, and Shane's face was nearly frozen due to the impact. There's a reason why the Canadian Destroyer is very rarely used. This move is basically a flipping piledriver, where the initiated wrestler flips over their opponent. The attacker then grabs the opponent's head and flips backwards, driving the opponent's head and upper body into the mat with significant force. However, there is a real element of danger to it, as a wrestler can easily land awkwardly on their neck from this. The Kimura Lock is an MMA move that can legitimately break a fighter's arm if they're caught and can't escape. It looks very painful, and it surely is, because the arm is evidently in an unnatural position, subjected to great pressure, especially if the performer is of colossal strength like Lesnar. In the storyline, Brock used it to break both Triple H and HBK's arm. In reality, it's the same maneuver that Tough Enough winner Daniel Purder used to nearly break Kurt Angle's arm. Even though AJ Lee is now retired, her submission still remains one that fans talk about. The move looked insane, with Lee wrapping herself around her opponent's bodies as she yanked back on their necks while trapping their arms, completely immobilizing them and forcing them to tap out. WWE originally allowed Samoa Joe to use the Muscle Buster during his successful run in NXT without any issues. The move involved Joe lifting his opponents, tucking their head and neck next to his, and dropping them back down on it. However, in a dark match, the move tragically ended Tyson Kidd's career, and WWE immediately put a stop to this horrifying move. Upon arriving on the main roster, Samoa Joe had to adopt a new finishing move, the Coquina Clutch, as the Muscle Buster had to be immediately phased out. While many banned WWE moves might make a return, chair strikes to the head will likely remain a strict no-no. At the height of the Attitude Era, unprotected chair shots were prevalent in almost every WWE match. What makes chair strikes at the head so dangerous is the fact that if a swing is unleashed with excessive force or mistaken technique, it creates unbelievable damage, from concussions and bleeding to long-term effects such as CTE. Aerial moves are always risky, but imagine flying and landing headfirst onto your opponents. This was a move that Chris Benoit used frequently, and his brain was seriously affected by it. It's a maneuver that can cause major damage and isn't safe for either of the people involved in the move. There's a reason this move is rarely performed, either in WWE or on the independent scene. Daniel Bryan did this maneuver on a number of occasions, but had to put an end to it after his serious head injury almost forced him into retirement. The pedigree is among the all-time favorite WWE finishers, and Triple H has the art of executing it in the most vicious way possible. Even though Triple H adjusted his delivery of the pedigree over the years, releasing his opponent's arm so they can protect themselves upon impact, the original version was most assuredly more dangerous. And even though Seth Rollins, Cody Rhodes, and more recently CM Punk have tried this maneuver, no one makes it as vicious as Triple H. Out of every move that Seth Rollins hits, the curb stomp is by far the most devastating. It works perfectly to end any match he competes in, simply because fans can easily understand how it would hurt to have your face crushed to the mat under the power of someone else's foot. There is a reason people weren't happy when he was banned from using the move for several years, and bringing it back was something that proved to be popular with the fans. Seeing Randy Orton run and kick his opponent directly in the head as hard as possible was always an uncomfortable sight. No one was safe when the Viper was in the mood to belt their heads and would use this move to write people off television. WWE banned this move for several years, but not for long, as the Legend Killer brought it back in 2020. There are different variations of the piledriver, but they all have the same result. Owing to the stature of Undertaker and Kane, it was easier for them to adjust their opponents to land safely. But if performed wrong, a wrestler can end up being paralyzed, or they could suffer a fractured neck. Stone Cold Steve Austin experienced this firsthand when Owen Hart botched a sit-out piledriver, causing Austin to suffer from a broken neck. There is little to no room for error with this move, and that's why it always gains a huge reaction whenever one gets busted out.